Section 8.1 talks about the traditional approach to motivation and looks at the difference between the attitude motivation test battery from Gardner and the motivational quantity. Watson and Kaplan also rated the 3 dimensions of motivation based on effort, enjoyment, and investment. The AMTB scale reflects these differently by motivational intensity, which is how much effort people expend in learning the language, attitudes towards learning the L2, and their desire to learn. The main goal of early motivation research was to be able to reliably measure the amount of motivation an individual will feel towards learning the L2. There are variables that increase or decrease the motivation called antecedents. The antecedent that plays the most central role in foreign language motivation is integrativeness, which is defined as an interest in learning the second language in order to get closer to the other language community. Section 8.3 reviews many of the other antecedents that take part in motivation. They include attitudes towards the L2 community and its speakers, attitudes towards instructional setting, orientations, social support, intergroup contact, ethno-vitality, and self-confidence when using the foreign language. In addition to the reasons that cause people to want to learn in L2, attitudes towards the L2 and its speakers will contribute to increased or diminished L2 motivation. These attitudes come from values, beliefs, and even behaviors that are rewarded or modeled in the environment.
In Section 8.4, we learn 2 different types of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic dealing mostly with the sheer sake of learning, the enjoyment you have, while extrinsic deals with having more of an ulterior goal that has little to do with the L2. Travel, friendship, and knowledge are 3 examples of self-regulated intrinsic motivation. A better salary, a more prestigious job, or because it is simply expected of them, is 3 examples of the extrinsic motivation. As adults, we would love to have the better job and better pay. However, our motivation in learning strives more from our enjoyment. In Section 8.5, we learned that orientations and attitudes play a huge role in L2 learners and their motivation as well, whether you are a child or an adult. Adults in particular are all about the orientations and attitudes. Just like kids, adults want a good grade and to pass their class. However, the classroom attitudes in particular play a pretty important role, especially with adults and their motivation. For example, if the adult does not like their teacher or their curriculum, then their motivation will be low and they will not learn very much. In Section 8.6, we learned about the motivation of children learning in L2 due to it being a requirement. Their motivation is drawn from wanting to make peace in the world or to become a prime minister when they grow up. However, this type of motivation can also apply to adults because they too want peace in the world and want to be able to communicate with others.
In Section 8.7, for the first time it was argued that L2 motivation was mostly portrayed as a static in the extended research, whereas in reality we all know that motivational changes over time are to be expected. Now the second language acquisition researchers feel compelled to investigate L2 motivation and not only as a generalized trait but also as a state trait. Beyond L2 achievements, we need to see what changes in behavior motivation can cause.
In Section 8.8, we go over the self system. There are 3 components: the ideal L2 self, the A2 L2 self, and the L2 learning experience. In the ideal L2 self, we picture ourselves as a person who wants to be able to speak the L2 and how we want to motivate ourselves to speak the L2. For the A2 L2 self, we pick out attributes that we believe we ought to have to proceed and avoid possible negative outcomes of learning our L2. For the L2 learning experience, we immediately learn from our environment and our experience. In Section 8.9, it wraps up the chapter. Motivation can be helped to learn an L2 in a positive or in a negative way, but overall motivation can play a big part in you learning an L2.